Okay, here we are at our third short video in a series of videos inspired by President Trump and his decision to target Twitter, who had the temerity to fact check the president. Can you imagine the nerve?
Yeah, that really is beyond the pale, that anyone would question the truthfulness, the accuracy, the veracity of our all-knowing, all-seeing, omnipotent president. I'm shocked by this. I don't know about you, but I'm shocked.
Well, he has the best words, and he only uses the best words on Twitter. So
that's correct. Yes.
Those are to be left alone. So, okay, one of the more ridiculous arguments that's being made, but this is one of my pet peeves. I think that what we're going to talk about in this short video is one of the most misunderstood principles about the U.S. Constitution that is widely shared among the population. And that is the belief, the erroneous belief, that a private actor can somehow violate your constitutional rights. We've talked about this in other videos. I harken back to the days of Sarah Palin. She sticks in my mind as one of the biggest offenders when it comes to that misinterpretation of how that just flat out mistake about how the Constitution applies. She used to always complain when a radio station would cut her off because she was saying something ridiculous or untrue. If they would cut her off, or even if the host of a radio program would disagree with her, she would say, "You're violating my First Amendment rights," not understanding, as a vice presidential candidate, that a private radio station cannot violate your First Amendment rights, because the First Amendment, like the entire Constitution with one exception that we don't have to get into, the First Amendment, like the entire Constitution, only applies to the government. The Constitution is a big speed limit, and it is facing the government, not private individuals. We have other speed limits that face us called statutes, right, and rules, right, that are made by agencies. That's what governs our conduct. The Constitution governs the government's conduct. So it is facing the government. It is written to it creates the government. It cabins governmental power. The audience for the Constitution is the government, not a private radio station. So how would that apply to Twitter?
It's pretty easy. Twitter, as we talked about in the last video, like all internet service providers, not all, I'm sure there are government entities that occupy some sort of a quasi-ISP function. But the ones that we're talking about here, things like Google and Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, these are all privately held companies. And by privately held, I guess, again, I don't mean to split hairs, but private individuals own the stock. This is not a government-owned or operated platform. So because it is privately owned and privately operated, it is not, with, again, as you say, some narrow exceptions that really aren't applicable here. It is not a state actor. It's not a government actor. So when Twitter decides that you can't show up on our platform and say X, whether you like it or not, it's Twitter's platform. They get to decide what is said on their platform. Right. And they're going to do that in such a way as to make sure that they fall within the 230 safe harbor that we talked about a couple of videos ago. They're going to do so in such a way that they can plausibly stand up in front of a federal court and say, look, judge, we did this in good faith. And so that's why, quite frankly, and I know we're going to get into this in the next video, but that's why Twitter's response to Donald Trump has been so weak and ineffective, because they are bending over backwards to try to fall within that good faith safe harbor.
Mm-hmm. So put another way, if we think about Twitter and Donald Trump, if you are a private actor, a private party, then it is not your job to honor other people's First Amendment rights. You're the one with First Amendment rights. Correct. You're the one with the First Amendment right to regulate the content that appears on your platform. So as between Twitter and Donald Trump, as usual, Donald Trump has it exactly backwards. It is not Twitter that has to protect Donald Trump's First Amendment right. It is Donald Trump who has to protect Twitter's First Amendment rights. And as we discussed in the last video, that doesn't seem to be his primary concern.
And it might help for some folks to think of it this way. And this is the example I always use with students. Does your neighbor have a constitutionally protected right to show up on your front lawn and stand on your front lawn and yell at the top of his or her lungs whatever he or she wants to? Does your neighbor have the right to show up on your front lawn and put yard signs up? The answer is no. It's your lawn. You get to control what gets said on your front lawn. When you do that, when you say to your neighbor, I don't want your signs in my front yard, the Constitution could not possibly care less about that. It's not a constitutional issue at all.
Right. So yet another fundamental misunderstanding of how the Constitution works. No, Twitter, it does not violate Donald Trump's First Amendment rights when it fact checks one of his tweets. And in the next and last video in this series, we're going to talk, I don't know, at a more practical level about maybe a more effective way Twitter could have responded to this, to the point you just made. So let's wrap this one up, and then we'll be back to talk about that.